But those families that are out there working hard to try and deliver a better success for their children.
But that's most families. That's Daniel. Sorry, I'm not having that.
Don't try and cut
I'm not having that.
That's most families.
The idea that private school. Sorry, no. I'm not going to let you finish your point.
All right, so in light of Nigel Farage officially backtracking on Reform UK's promise to slash 90 billion in taxes, proving they are just like the parties they claim to despise, I thought it was essential to revisit this classic call. The caller, a passionate reform supporter, sounds like a former Tory boy, swore to us that reform was different, that they were the voice of common sense, but their U-turn shows us that they aren't so different after all. If you want to see more calls like this, show your support by hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. Now let's watch this together, and then I'll give you my thoughts at the end. The
reform, the manifesto launched, the policies in it, are they a serious party, or are they basically very little more than a pressure group, a protest group perhaps? Daniel's calling from Basingstoke. Daniel.
I wouldn't call 20% of the population taking part in a YouGov poll and actually publicly saying that they would vote for them a pressure group. I would have called them a pressure group if we were talking a year ago with Richard Tice in charge and single digits in polling, and bearing in mind that we all know that YouGov polls are usually underestimated. And people, I suppose you could argue, were shy Tory voters and wouldn't normally admit they were going to vote Tory. Probably you would say you've now got the shy reform impact, probably because certain members of the party or certain policies are presented to be potentially very political in their extent around race and immigration, which makes certain bits of it uncomfortable. But no, I wouldn't call them a pressure group. I'd call them someone who's actually talking common sense, because the Tories have spent the last 14 years promising us everything. I don't even bother reading their manifesto, because you may as well use it as yesterday's chip paper or toilet paper, because none of it ever comes true. None of it ever gets reality. They've promised they're going to get net immigration down to the tens of thousands for God knows how long now. I think it's in the last 4 manifestos they've still not achieved it.
The Reform
Labour Party's idea.
The Reform Party, just on that, the Reform Party talking about zero net migration. That's not realistic.
I don't think that's actually the words that were used. It was to get it under control. So again, that's another inflammatory direction.
No, they are promising net zero migration.
Yes, getting it down to the point where it's under control at the moment. It is out of control. So why are we then having a whole argument about if you're coming to university, you need to bring your dependents? You're coming here to study. You don't need to bring your entire family. And to the point the gentleman was making earlier on about, well, if you want to, in effect, remove your right to use the NHS and remove your right to take part in the use of public services like schools, why shouldn't you get a tax break? It's actually not a bad idea, because if we end up with Labour in, we're going to stick a 20% tax threshold onto private schools. And granted, the rich, the absolute super rich, the top 1%, it won't even net on their income. They'll just increase their price on something, not even notice the cost. But those families that are out there working hard to try and deliver a better success for their children.
But that's most families. That's Daniel. Sorry, I'm not having that.
Don't try and cut.
I'm not having that.
Most families.
The idea that private school. Sorry, no. I'm not going to let you finish your point, because that is incredible. No, I'm going to let you come back, but I'm not going to let you get away with claiming that parents that send their children to private schools somehow work harder or care more about their children's education, because that's not the case, and it's massively offensive, I think, to claim that it is.
Again, no, you want to take offence, you take offence.
It is offensive. Because most people care about their children's education. They can't afford to send their kids to private school.
They don't. That's fantastic for them. Go and get a job where you can afford it. If those people have got a job and they want to
those nurses, those outrageous nurses, Daniel, come on, get real.
Let me finish the point.
No, because you're not letting me come back at all. You're just talking, and you're not letting me challenge it. Are you seriously saying that nurses and, I don't know, junior doctors and teachers and police officers who can't afford to send their children to private school, it's on them because they should just go and become bankers? Is that really what you're telling me?
No, because again, you're not letting me finish. And actually, if you look at it, the vast majority of public sector working teachers actually send a lot of their kids to private schools.
That's nonsense.
So back to the point I was trying to make.
You're saying things that aren't true. You're saying things that are false. You cannot come on the radio and say the majority of teachers in this country send their children to private school. It's untrue. It's a lie.
It is incorrect, and you're wrong. So back to the point I'm trying to make. So if we then whack a 20% tax increase on private schools, where are the seats coming from? Where are the teachers coming from in the public sector to teach these children? There isn't the teachers. Because we have 500 of them coming over on a boat every day.
500
and we're putting them up in hotels. 500 immigrants of all working maids and kids coming over on boats on a daily basis. Then we're schooling them, we're feeding them, we're putting them up in hotels, we're giving them money.
And you think that's why we haven't got enough teachers?
No, we haven't got enough teachers because we can't have the money to put any more in, because we haven't got enough people working, because people don't want to work, because they don't want to bloody pay more tax. So if we move the tax thresholds up, people will declare more of their income. Therefore, then people will earn more.
What if we just paid teachers more?
Where's the money coming from? What tax would you like to raise this week? Because I'm bored of
I'll tell you what I wouldn't do, Daniel. I'll tell you what I wouldn't do.
Individuals,
Daniel,
what would you like to raise?
You asked me, let me answer the question. I'll tell you what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't cut taxes for those that are lucky enough to send their children to private school. I wouldn't cut taxes for those that are lucky enough to have private healthcare. I wouldn't cut taxes for the 4% of people that pay inheritance tax. And I wouldn't cut taxes for the big corporations that pay corporation tax. Would you?
No one's asking about cutting tax.
Yes, that's those four things. Sorry, those are Daniel. Daniel, those tax cuts are Reform Party policy.
Yes, and my point being is that all we ever talk about is adding more tax, but nothing ever.
But you're saying there's not enough money to recruit teachers while supporting tax cuts for the wealthiest people in society. Is that right?
Hang on. How is moving the tax threshold from 12,500 to 20,000 helping the richest people? Because that's what we were talking about a second ago.
It's the other four tax cuts that I just mentioned to you.
And they are a suggestion, which actually, if you're turning around and saying you've paid in and your NI, a percentage of money that's allocated to your cost of using the NHS, and you're saying, I'm not going to use the NHS, I have no right to use it, I revoke my right to my allocation
so those people with private health insurance, when they need an ambulance, what happens then?
Then they don't get one. That's the point. You're basically saying, I am quite happy to give up my rights to use the NHS and I will go private. Therefore, why shouldn't you have the money back? Because what you're basically
do you think the people that don't directly use
my right to use
Daniel, you've got to let me come back. You can't just talk endlessly. You have to let me come back. Do you think the people that have private health insurance benefit from the NHS in other ways?
In what extent? To
the extent that having an actually healthy society where people who can't afford private healthcare can get treated and therefore go back to work is a good thing for all of us, even if we have private healthcare?
I don't disagree with you. But my point is, why am I then paying for? Say, for example, I can afford private healthcare. Yeah. Why am I then paying for everybody else?
Because you benefit from having a functioning health system.
But that doesn't function, that we invest billions more every year in, that doesn't work, that you can't get a medical appointment, that you can't see a doctor, that you can't see a dentist. So it doesn't work. No matter how much more money we pump in, it doesn't work. So it's like the exact argument of just doing something for the sake of doing it. We're all so emotional about the NHS. It doesn't work. It's functionally
It did work, didn't
broken.
It worked until quite recently. It worked pretty well.
It hasn't worked,
and it can work again if the funding keeps up with the demand, which hasn't happened.
And spend more money and spend more money.
Yep. Rather than using it to cut taxes for the small proportion who have private health insurance or can send their children to private school or are big corporations or the 4% that pay inheritance tax. Yes, I would rather that money went into the NHS than all of those things. I would rather that money went into the NHS than building more prisons to lock up every single drug dealer in this country for life. Yes, I'm afraid I would. And on that, Daniel, and everything else I suspect that we could possibly talk about, we're going to disagree.
All right, so let's just be clear about what we just saw. It wasn't just a debate, it was a perfect window into the soul of the Reform UK movement, and it's relevant now more than ever. The call has started with a deeply offensive idea that parents who send their kids to private schools simply work harder than nurses, teachers, police officers, paramedics, cleaners, etc. When challenged, he resorted to an outright lie that most teachers send their own kids to private schools. And Ben was of course right to shut this down. But listening to it again, after Farage has abandoned his central economic promise, reveals a much darker truth. This call, and Reform UK in general, are never really about sound economics. It's really just about channeling a specific kind of resentment. The cold, hard reality of a Reform UK government is now clear. It's one that prioritises wealth and deepens inequality. Just as the caller's comments about private schools revealed, they're a party that have no real plan for funding the NHS or schools, and they're perfectly happy to promise tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy until it became politically convenient. Their immigration policy is going to be a British version of Donald Trump's, which will inevitably involve brutality, division, and the persecution of minorities. A government led by Farage would make this country more fraught with anger and resentment than anything we've ever seen since the miners' strikes. And let's not mince words. Nigel Farage is a dangerous man. His platform is built on lies, scapegoating, and thinly veiled authoritarianism that preys on people's fears. We're in a critical moment right now in the UK. Everyone who considers themselves anti-fascist and anti-authoritarian must unite to stop him from getting into office. The stakes are simply too high. If you don't want to end up like the USA, which we can now see as a basket case, then you must hear and heed the words I'm saying. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to see more videos like this, hit the like and subscribe buttons. And please ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.